just once we were on the court, everything was out the door. It was all about winning. And that's what we sought out to do every night.
One of the famed members of the early 90s Runnin Rebels. When you threw up the lob, he turned into a wide receiver with his ability to pinpoint the ball and catch it with one or two hands. Stacey Augmon came out of college as an all-world defender with uncanny body control, earning him the nickname Plastic Man. He was an incredible defender during his college years, and while he didn't reach that same defensive level in the NBA, he was still a tough out. A raw athlete in his youth, he could shut his man down on one end, then come back and punch it on the other end. His best years in the NBA were spent with an Atlanta Hawks team transitioning out of the Dominique Wilkins era, as he looked like a promising young talent. Yet once he left Atlanta, his career seemed to take a nosedive, as he fell victim to a changing league that was putting more emphasis on the outside shot. But there's a reason Stacey Augmon stuck around the NBA for 15 years. He played defense, worked hard, and accepted his role. And even if it was brief, Plastic Man was a problem in his youth. And for younger generations looking to carve their path, any coach would be happy to have a Stacey Augmon on their team. Let's jog your memory. A Pasadena native, Stacey Augmon would attend John Muir High School, where he would become one of the top players in the state. Augmon would cap off his time with the Mustangs in 1986, where as a senior, he would lead the team to their first ever championship, while taking home the Pacific League Player of the Year honors, as well as being voted MVP of the 4A division by Sporting News. And while many schools were vying for Augmon's services, he would choose UNLV to play under coach Jerry Tarkanian, who had spent many years both playing and coaching in California. Unfortunately for Augmon, his college career wouldn't begin as planned, as due to the NCAA's recently adopted Prop 48 regulation, Augmon was ineligible to play due to his high school grades. So he would not play on the 1987 Rebels team, who went 37-2 and made it all the way to the Final Four. But Augmon was eligible for the 88 season, yet the Rebels had lost their top two players in Armin Gilliam and Freddie Banks, but they still featured senior forwards Gerald Patio and Jarvis Bassnight. The 6'8" Augmon would show his versatility early, starting at point guard his first few games, and would eventually spend time at every position this season. And while he wasn't much of an offensive threat in his freshman year, he quickly became known as a world-class defender, with his 2 steals per game leading the team. UNLV wasn't the same powerhouse offense that led the nation in scoring the year before, but they were still top 20. Yet their biggest improvement was defense, as they went from being ranked 207th in 87 to 55th in 88. But these Rebels would still start the year 8-0 and would lose just once in their first 18 games, which would include an upset win over number 3 Temple, which saw Augmon hold Owls star Mark Macon to 9 of 22 shooting. And overall, UNLV would go 23-4 in the regular season and rank number 5 in the nation. The conference tourney would see them beat Cal State Fullerton in the quarterfinal before losing to UC Irvine in the semis. But they would still get a tournament bid and a first-round matchup with Missouri State. This was a rough showing from Augmon, as he would find himself in foul trouble and play just 24 minutes, scoring 3 points. Yet UNLV would hold on for a 4-point win, as they were set for a second-round matchup with Iowa. This would be a much better performance for Augmon, as he would put up 10 points on 5 of 6 shooting, along with 10 rebounds, as well as a poster dunk on the Hawkeyes' BJ Armstrong. But the Rebels would commit 21 turnovers for the game, with Augmon being responsible for 5 of those, as Iowa would beat them easily, with Augmon's freshman year seeing him average about 9 points, 6 rebounds, and 2 assists per game. After the season, Augmon would join the U.S. national team for his defensive ability, as they geared up to play in the 1988 Summer Olympics. But Augmon would barely make an impact, as he appeared in 6 out of 8 contests, averaging less than 7 minutes per game, as the U.S. were only able to bring home the bronze medal, a medal that Augmon would end up losing anyway. UNLV had lost some seniors to graduation, but they were welcoming a lot of great pieces for the 89 season, as joining Augmon were junior center David Butler and incoming freshman guard Anderson Hunt, with the best of the bunch being a sophomore transfer in guard Greg Anthony, who was another great defender. This year would see Augmon take on a more prominent role in the offense, as he would be the team's second leading scorer on nearly 52% from the field, and a surprising 42% from deep, while also leading the team in rebounding, as he would be named First Team All-Conference and the Big West Player of the Year, while also being awarded the NABC Defensive Player of the Year title. UNLV got off to a disappointing start, as they were 2-2 after 4 games, but they would then win 11 straight, followed by dropping 4 of their next 6, and by season's end, they were 23-7. The Big West tournament went well, as they would defeat UC Irvine, followed by Cal State Fullerton, and then New Mexico State in the championship. securing them a tournament berth. The first round brought Idaho, who the Rebels would defeat, as Augmon would score a team-high 17 points on over 58% shooting, while even going 3 of 5 from deep. Round 2 brought DePaul, and Augmon again played well, with a 17-point, 11-rebound double-double, as the Rebels took the win and were on their way to the Sweet 16, where their biggest test was waiting, in top-ranked Arizona, led by star senior Sean Elliott, who had torched Augmon for 32 points earlier in the year. And it didn't look like Augmon forgot that, as in the first half, he would allow Elliott to score just 2 baskets, while forcing him to turn the ball over 4 times. However, Elliott would have a much better second half, finishing the game with 22 points and 14 rebounds, but still committing 5 turnovers for the game. Augmon was solid on the offensive end, finishing with 15 points and 4 assists. But after UNLV went cold and Arizona went ahead late, the Rebels needed a miracle.
Now they have 8 seconds to go, and Hunt will try for a 3 and hit it!
Anderson Hunt's three-pointer would be the game-winning basket as UNLV advanced to an Elite 8 matchup with Seton Hall. But this just wasn't the Rebels' night, as they would shoot about 30% as a team, with Augmon going 4 for 12, en route to scoring 8 points and adding 2 steals, in what would be a blowout loss for UNLV, as Augmon's year had seen him average about 15.5 points, 7.5 rebounds, and 2.5 assists per game. But luckily for the Rebels, reinforcements were on the way. Joining the Rebels for the 1990 season was prized JUCO transfer Larry Johnson, as his addition pushed UNLV to the next level. Plain and simple, UNLV was just better than everyone else in 1990, and while Johnson was their best offensive player, Augmon was still their defensive ace and a team leader. The Rebels' entire starting lineup would average double figures, and Augmon would be one of 2 players to average over a steal and block per game, as he would again be named NABC Defensive Player of the Year. Augmon would appear in 39 out of a possible 40 games this season, as he would be suspended for a January 28th game against LSU due to unpaid phone bills, a game which UNLV would lose. But they didn't do much losing, as their fast-paced play made them the 8th highest scoring team in the nation, and after a disappointing 3-2 start, they would go 23-3 the rest of the way, ending the regular season at 26-5 as the number 2 team in the nation. They would fly through the conference tournament, defeating Cal State Fullerton, Pacific, and Long Beach State to repeat as Big West champs, as they would enter the NCAA tournament as a 1 seed. The first round brought Little Rock, who UNLV would beat easily, as Augmon finished with a team-high 16 points, along with 7 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, and 2 blocks. Round 2 brought Ohio State, and another win. Augmon would have only 6 points, but would also help hold Buckeyes star Jim Jackson to 11 points on 5 of 15 shooting. Ball State almost pulled off the upset in the Sweet 16, but UNLV would hold on to win by 2, as Augmon finished with 20 points and 9 rebounds on over 57% shooting, while adding 2 steals and 3 blocks. The Elite 8 brought Loyola Marymount, and another easy win for the Rebels. Augmon exploded for a team-high 33 points on 65% shooting, while adding 11 rebounds and 6 assists, as the Rebels were making a return to the Final Four to take on Georgia Tech. Augmon continued his great tournament run with a team-high 22 points on 9 of 16 shooting, as the Rebels were heading to the national championship to take on Christian Laettner and the Duke Blue Devils. And they would proceed to humiliate Duke, as UNLV won by 30 points. Augmon would have a modest 12-point performance, but would shoot 6 of 7 from the field and add 7 assists, as after 3 years, Augmon had helped UNLV to their first title, but his season had seen him average about 14 points, 7 rebounds, and 3.5 assists per game. But things came crashing down prior to the 1991 season. UNLV had been involved in a more than decade-long court case around misconduct and violations, and after the ruling was handed down that the Rebels would be banned from this year's tournament, and in turn unable to defend their title, Tarkanian suggested that he would sit out the tournament if the team could still play, and Augmon would respond that if Tark's not coaching, he's not playing. But it was a bit of a surprise that he was playing for UNLV at all, as he, Johnson, and Anthony were guaranteed first-round picks had they left after last season, yet they all came back for their senior year, even knowing about the likelihood of the program receiving punishment. But fortunately for Augmon and the rest of the team, an agreement would be made that UNLV would be permitted to defend their title in '91, and then be banned from postseason play while having no televised games in 1992. Somehow UNLV would be even better in '91. They would have a top 5 offense and a defense in the top 25% of the nation. Augmon came back a more well-rounded player, averaging career highs in points and steals, while shooting a career high 58.7% from the field. And after going 32% from deep last year, he would up it to nearly 47% this year, while shooting nearly double the amount of threes. and the regular season came and went without the Runnin Rebels seeing a blemish on their record. UNLV would turn in a 27-0 regular season, winning every game by double digits except for one, when they beat Arkansas by 7 points on February 10th, in a matchup of the top 2 teams in the nation, with Augmon going for a game-high 31 points. Augmon would be voted first-team All-Conference, as well as a consensus second-team All-American, and he would also take home his 3rd straight NABC Defensive Player of the Year award. UNLV kept winning through the conference tourney, as they would three-peat as Big West champs after defeating Fresno State in the final, as the undefeated Rebels were the overwhelming favorites to win it all again. The first round of the NCAA tournament would be an easy win over Montana, as Augmon would finish with 20 points on 8 of 9 shooting while hitting both of his 3-point attempts. Round 2 would be a tough matchup with Georgetown, with Augmon recording 9 points and 10 rebounds. Next was Utah, who UNLV would defeat easily, as Augmon would have 15 points and 3 steals while shooting 6 of 9 from the field. The Elite 8 brought Seton Hall, and UNLV would get some revenge from a couple years earlier with a win, as Augmon had a complete performance, with 13 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 4 steals, and 2 blocks, setting up a rematch of last year's championship game, as UNLV was set to take on Duke in the Final Four. These Blue Devils looked different, as they had added Grant Hill, but Leitner was still the star and would play as such with 28 points. Augmon would have a couple early buckets, but overall was just a step slow this game, struggling to find his shot or hold on to the ball, as he went 3 for 10 from the field and committed 4 turnovers. And a couple last-second free throws from Christian Leitner would be the difference maker, as Duke won by 2 and ended UNLV's perfect season. But Augmon's senior year had seen him average about 16.5 points, 7.5 rebounds, and 3.5 assists per game. But now Augmon couldn't return to UNLV, so the 91 NBA draft would be his next stop.
With the 9th pick of the 1991 NBA draft, the Atlanta Hawks select Stacey Augmon from the University of Nevada at Las Vegas.
And just to give you an idea of how highly people thought of Augmon's defensive ability,
A lot of people say he is a Dennis Rodman type forward defender, strong on defense.
being drafted to the Atlanta Hawks may have been the ideal landing spot for Augmon. The Hawks had built their game plan around the slashing above the rim play of aging franchise legend Dominique Wilkins. And while this was still Wilkins' team, Augmon was a young, hyper-athletic wing with a suspect outside shot, so he could likely execute some of the plays designed for Wilkins, as the Hawks may have been the perfect team to allow him to play to his offensive strengths and mask his weaknesses. Atlanta was one of the worst in the league from beyond the arc, but one of the best from inside it this season. They featured franchise star Dominique Wilkins and bruising forward Kevin Willis, as Augmon would come in and act as a third option for the team as a rookie. He would be the team's 3rd leading scorer and could check opponents' top players, so Wilkins could preserve his energy for the offensive end, as Augmon would also tie for the team lead in steals, en route to being named first team All-Rookie. The Hawks were having an alright season, as they were 21-20 going into a January 28th game versus Philly, but in that game, Wilkins would rupture his Achilles tendon, ending his season. A couple weeks after that, Augmon would be a participant in the NBA Slam Dunk Contest, but wouldn't have a great showing. So with Wilkins going down, Augmon had to step up, as he would up his numbers the rest of the way, which included him dropping a season-high 32 points on nearly 61% shooting in a March 23rd defeat of Golden State. And he would average nearly 22 points over the last 8 games of the season. But without Wilkins, the Hawks would finish with just a 38-44 record, which wouldn't be enough for the playoffs, as Augmon's rookie season had ended with him averaging about 13.5 points, 5 rebounds, and 2.5 assists per game. Shortly before the start of the 93 season, Augmon would have arthroscopic surgery on his left knee and miss the first 4 games of the year. The Hawks had been known for a while as a team more likely to try and outscore you than to try to stop you from scoring, but they started to address this with Augmon, and now featured a great defender at point guard in the newly acquired Mookie Blaylock. Wilkins returned from his injury to play in 71 games in one of the greatest comebacks from an Achilles injury in sports history. Augmon would see a slight dip in all of his numbers, except for scoring, as he again would be a top 3 scorer on the team. And this year he would shoot over 50% from the field, as Augmon would hit double figures in 55 games this season. The Hawks would hover around 500 all year, but would have a high point late in the season, as they would go 12-3 in March, and overall would end the regular season at 43-39, which would get them the 7th seed and a first-round matchup with Chicago. Augmon would have an underwhelming playoff debut, as in Game 1 he would be held to 7 points on 2 of 8 shooting. and would get torched by Michael Jordan for 35 points. Game 2 was a better offensive showing, as Augmon went for 14 points on 6 of 11 shooting. And while Jordan still had 29, he shot just 10 for 24. But the Hawks had fallen behind 0-2. They wouldn't fare any better in Atlanta, as Chicago completed the sweep, with Jordan going for 39 on over 57% shooting. Augmon would have his best game of the series, going for 15 points along with 4 assists and 3 steals. But year 2 had ended, with Augmon averaging about 14 points, 4 rebounds, and 2.5 assists per game. The following season would see Atlanta get their best year from Augmon, but few were expecting it to be the peak of his career. Atlanta looked the same to begin the 94 season, with the exception of their coach, as Bob Weiss was out and Lenny Wilkins was in. And under Wilkins, the Hawks changed their identity and became one of the stingiest defenses in the league. Augmon would play and start in all 82 games on a career-high 31.8 minutes per game, as he would improve his numbers from last season, averaging career highs in points and steals per game, while shooting a career-high 51% from the field. Augmon would hit double figures in 66 games and recorded 5 double-doubles. He would have an especially great performance in a November 24th defeat of Milwaukee, when he had a career-high 7 steals to go along with 16 points, 9 rebounds, and 5 assists. He would also be the Hawks' third leading scorer among players who appeared in at least 50 games for the team, and this becomes more relevant due to what happened on February 24th. With the 36-16 Hawks in a 3-way tie for first place in the East, they traded a frustrated Wilkins to the Clippers for Danny Manning, as they didn't want to lose Wilkins for nothing in free agency after the season. So Manning would play in 26 of their final 30 games, as the Hawks would go 21-9 in those games, to finish at 57-25, which would still get them the 1 seed and a first-round matchup with Miami. Augmon would turn in a better performance this time around, as he would shoot over 57% for the series. He would have 14 points on 5 of 7 shooting in a Game 1 loss, but then just 6 points in a Game 2 win, where he would add 8 rebounds and 4 assists. Then a Game 3 loss would see him go for 10 points. Up to this point, Miami's Steve Smith had been playing great, scoring at least 22 points in each game. But with his back against the wall, Augmon stepped up over the next 2 games, as in Game 4 he would drop 19 points on 6 of 8 shooting, then follow that up with 14 points and 4 assists in Game 5, while also helping hold Smith to 25 total points on a combined 7 of 26 shooting, as Atlanta won both to take the series in 5. Round 2 brought Indiana, and Augmon started strong with 17 points and 3 steals in a Game 1 loss. But he would struggle after this, hitting double figures just 1 more time in the series and never recording another steal. But he would do a solid job on the Pacers' Reggie Miller, as for the series, Miller shot below 41%. But the Pacers were able to outlast the Hawks and take the series in 6 games, as Augmon's year had seen him average about 15 points, 5 rebounds, and 2.5 assists per game. Manning turned out to be a rental, as he left in free agency, leaving a big scoring need for Atlanta, and they would do their best to address this early in the season when they traded a package headlined by Kevin Willis to the Miami Heat for a package headlined by Steve Smith. Augmon would give his usual contribution as the team's third leading scorer, but he saw his shooting drop to about 45%, as the Hawks were now one of the highest volume 3-point shooting teams in the league, trying to take advantage of the first year of a shortened 3-point line experiment. And although Augmon would only take 26 3-pointers this season, this was almost 4 times more attempts than any other season of his career. Augmon would play and start in 76 games while hitting double figures in 58 of them, which included his career high of 36 points on 12 of 20 shooting in a January 3rd loss to Portland. The Hawks remained a great defensive team, but had also become one of the lowest scoring offenses, as they would take a step back this year, finishing with just a 42-40 record, but still getting a playoff matchup with Indiana. But Augmon was not at full strength, as he had sprained his ankle late in the season and was still feeling the effects. He would come off the bench over the first 2 games and play a combined 22 minutes, scoring 7 total points and committing 8 total fouls, as the Hawks fell behind 0-2. Augmon would start Game 3 and give the Hawks an efficient 14 points along with 5 rebounds and 2 steals. But the Hawks lost again, as Reggie Miller had his way with Atlanta, averaging nearly 32 points for the series, as Augmon's year had seen him average about 14 points, 5 rebounds, and 2.5 assists per game. Over the offseason, Augmon would re-sign with the Hawks for another 5 years, as Atlanta retained the same core in '96. But a midseason trade would see them acquire Christian Laettner, and for the first time in his career, Augmon was coming off the bench, acting as a sixth man while Ken Norman became a starter. Augmon would be part of the second unit over his first 28 games before regaining his starting role in early January. Yet although he would get over 10 more minutes per game as a starter, he would only see a minor change in production. Yet soon after Augmon returned to his starting role, the Hawks would go on a 10-game win streak, which would help them finish with a 46-36 record and get them yet another playoff matchup with Indiana. Fortunately for Atlanta, an eye injury would keep Reggie Miller out for the first 4 games of the series, as the team split them. Yet Augmon wasn't making a huge offensive impact, as his best performance would come in Game 2 when he had 10 points, which would be his only game of the series in double figures. Miller returned for the series-deciding Game 5, but Atlanta would pull out a 2-point victory to move on to a second-round matchup with Orlando. The Hawks would be no match for Shaq and Penny, but Augmon would have his best playoff series of his career. He would go for a playoff career high of 23 points in Game 1, then would score at least 12 points in 3 of the next 4 games. But in the end, Orlando took the series in 5, as Augmon's year had seen him average about 12.5 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists per game. Yet even though he had just signed an extension, Augmon's time with the Hawks would soon end, and his production would completely fall off a cliff. Due to the Hawks wanting to sign prized free agent Dikembe Mutombo, they needed to clear some cap space. So Augmon, along with Grant Long, would be traded to Detroit for a package of draft picks. Augmon seemed like someone who could produce for a Pistons team who had just lost shooting guard Allen Houston, yet still featured Grant Hill and an aging Joe Dumars. But this is really where you started to see Augmon fall victim to a changing league. With the three-point shot becoming more and more prominent, Augmon's offensive skill set became outdated, and his lack of an outside shot affected his playing time. He would start 3 of the first 5 games before seeing his minutes decrease significantly, and DMPs beside Augmon's name started to become common. And after a while, the normally stoic Augmon had had enough. After appearing in 20 of the team's first 34 games, Augmon reportedly cursed out head coach Doug Collins in practice, due to Collins calling a foul on him after not calling them on anyone else. And this resulted in Collins kicking Augmon out of practice, with the Pistons now actively trying to trade him. Augmon would not appear in any more games for Detroit before being traded to Portland for a package of young players on January 24th. Augmon joined a Blazers team who featured guys like Arvydas Sabonis and Rasheed Wallace, and who were already set at the wing positions, with Isaiah Ryder at the 2 and Cliff Robinson at the 3, as Augmon would settle into a much lesser role, which he would fill for the remainder of his career. While his numbers looked quite similar to what they had been in Detroit, he did go from shooting about 40% in his 20 games with the Pistons to nearly 52% in his 47 games with the Blazers. Portland was an up-and-coming team, and although he was just 28, Augmon provided them with a much-needed mature veteran presence, as they would finish the season at 49-33 and get a first-round matchup with the Lakers. This would be a gentleman's sweep for LA, as Augmon didn't see the floor too often, averaging less than 9 minutes per game and scoring 7 total points. But his overall season had ended with him averaging about 4.5 points, 2.5 rebounds, and an assist per game. The 98 Blazers made some changes as they replaced PJ Carlesimo with Mike Dunleavy and signed Brian Grant in the offseason, while also making a big mid-season trade when they sent Kenny Anderson to the Raptors for Damon Stoudamire. Augmon would be a valuable bench player for the team as he appeared in 71 games and even started 23 of them throughout the season, putting up respectable numbers in those games. Augmon was never again going to give you much on the offensive end, but he'd have his moments, and his energy and attitude were always positives for a Blazers team who finished the season at 46-36 and got a rematch with the Lakers in round 1. This year would be the same result, as LA would pull off the gentleman's sweep. Augmon would appear in all 4 games, but average less than 7 minutes a night, and score 5 total points, as his 98 season had seen him average about 5.5 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 1 assist per game. But the lockout-shortened 99 season would finally see Augmon experience some real team success. Augmon would appear in 48 games in 1999, starting 21 of them for a Blazers team with a top 5 scoring offense and top 10 scoring defense. Augmon would again have modest contributions, yet was still an important part of the rotation, and was appreciated for his willingness to play his role after being a lottery pick and a starter for the first 5 years of his career. And the Blazers were really starting to put it together, as their 35-15 record would be the 3rd best record in the league and would get them a first-round matchup with Phoenix. They would defeat the Suns in a convincing 3-game sweep, as Augmon would have a 9-point performance in a Game 2 win. The second round brought Utah, and the series would go 6 games, with Augmon appearing in every game, recording 2 points, 1 steal, and 1 block in a Game 4 win, as Portland won to advance to a conference finals matchup with San Antonio. Once again, Augmon would see the floor in every game, even scoring 8 points in a Game 2 loss. But the Spurs shut the door on Portland with a 4-game sweep, as Augmon's regular season had seen him average about 4.5 points, 2.5 rebounds, and 1 assist per game. But Augmon would be on the move this offseason. The Blazers jumped at an opportunity to acquire Scottie Pippen from the Houston Rockets and would send a huge package to Houston on October 2nd, with Augmon being included in it. But he'd be back in Portland soon enough, as Augmon didn't really fit any of Houston's needs, as they would waive him 10 days after the trade. And then 6 days later, he would return to Portland on a much cheaper contract. So while Portland added Pippen, they no longer featured Ryder, but they had also added Detlef Schrempf. So now there were even less minutes for Augmon, as once the Blazers established their rotation, Augmon started seeing less and less opportunity, only appearing in 59 games this season. But the Blazers, carried by their elite defense, would go 59-23 and enter the playoffs in a matchup with Minnesota. Portland would take the series in 4, as Augmon would appear briefly in 2 games. Round 2 brought the Jazz, who the Blazers would defeat in 5, as Augmon again appeared briefly in just 2 games. The conference finals brought the Lakers, in a series most famous for the Blazers' Game 7 collapse. Augmon would appear briefly in 3 games, but would have a memorable Game 3, as he came off the bench in the 3rd quarter and scored 8 points over a 3-minute stretch. But the Blazers came up short again, as Augmon's regular season had seen him average about 3.5 points, 2 rebounds, and 1 assist per game. Team dysfunction and injury would lead to Augmon seeing more playing time in 01, as he would get a lot of extra minutes filling in when Scottie Pippen and Bonzi Wells were injured. Augmon would appear in 66 games and start 23 of them, even hitting double figures in 10 games. And although Portland wasn't as good as last year, they were still able to put together a 50-32 season and get a first-round playoff matchup with the Lakers. Augmon had a great start with 9 points in Game 1, but after leaving the bench during a scuffle in Game 2, he would be suspended for Game 3, as the Lakers swept the Blazers, with Augmon's season seeing him average about 4.5 points, 2.5 rebounds, and 1.5 assists per game. But this time, Augmon's stint in Portland would actually be over. A free agent Augmon would sign with the Charlotte Hornets. He would again be a solid rotation player on a team led by Baron Davis and Jamal Mashburn, and Augmon would give the Hornets good minutes in 77 games this season, fitting in well with the defense-first Hornets team, who would finish the season at 44-38 and get a first-round matchup with Orlando. Augmon would appear in all 4 games, getting over 21 minutes per game, as the Hornets were without an injured Mashburn, and Augmon would improve each game, culminating in a 13-point, 2-steal performance in a Game 4 win to wrap up the series. The second round brought New Jersey, but Augmon would have a decreased role, getting about 13 minutes a night as the Nets won in 5, with Augmon's season seeing him average about 3 points, 1.5 rebounds, and 1 assist per game. Augmon was back on a Hornets team now located in New Orleans for the 03 season. Davis would miss 32 games this year, but a healthy Mashburn would make minutes harder to come by for Augmon. Yet he would still appear in 70 games and start 3 of them, as the Hornets went 47-35 and got a first-round matchup with Philly. Augmon came out strong in a Game 1 loss with 11 points, but the next 3 games would see smaller contributions from Augmon before he would log DNPs in Games 5 and 6, as the Hornets lost the series, with Augmon's season seeing him average about 3 points, 1.5 rebounds, and 1 assist per game. Mashburn would manage just 19 games in 04, so a 35-year-old Augmon was again given a larger role, as he would appear in 69 games and start 24 of them, and would even go for 21 points and 5 steals in a March 13th defeat of Golden State. Injuries and coaching change would affect the Hornets, as they would finish with a 41-41 record, but would get a first-round matchup with Miami. This series would go the full 7 games, and Augmon would have some great performances, as in Game 1 he would have 10 points, 2 steals, and a block. Then in Game 4, he would go for 17 points and 6 boards in a win. He would go scoreless in Game 7 as Miami wrapped up the series, with Augmon's regular season seeing him average about 6 points, 2.5 rebounds, and 1 assist per game. But his scoreless Game 7 would be the final postseason appearance of Augmon's career. Prior to the 05 season, Augmon would be a depth signing by the Orlando Magic, joining another team with an often injured small forward in Grant Hill, who would actually have a healthy season in 05, meaning Augmon would have a small role as he appeared in 55 games, starting 7 of them, for a Magic team who would finish the season at 36-46 and miss the playoffs, as Augmon's year had seen him average about 3.5 points, 2 rebounds, and half an assist per game. He was again with Orlando for the 06 season, but a now 37-year-old Augmon would often be left out of the rotation and miss some time with a hernia, as he would appear in just 36 games for a Magic team who finished the year at 36-46 and missed the playoffs, with Augmon's season seeing him average about 2 points, 1.5 rebounds, and half an assist per game. Augmon would sit out the 07 season and sign with Denver for training camp prior to the 08 season, but he would be waived a few weeks later, marking the end of his playing career. After the NBA, Augmon would transition into a career in coaching, working as an assistant for many teams, including his alma mater of UNLV from 2011 to 2016. While his pro career was underwhelming, we may be talking about Stacey Augmon much differently had he been wrapping up his NBA career in the early 90s instead of beginning it. The league was transitioning out of an era that valued high percentage shots close to the basket and very physical play into an era that more valued the long-range shot, and Augmon's skill set did not translate well to that. He came out of UNLV with the defense and length that any coach would love on their team, but didn't quite reach that same level in the NBA. His offensive game lacked versatility, and that hurt him in a changing league, but he still gave Atlanta some great years and production, then was a great rotation player in Portland, where he was more of a luxury than a necessity. It can look like his career took a nosedive after Atlanta, but he gracefully accepted a much lesser role wherever he went, and even though his game became less appreciated, his value is evident by his 15-year NBA career, and Plastic Man will always be a legend for what he did at UNLV. But that's it for today's episode on Stacey Augmon. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. If you liked it, check out this one on his UNLV running mate, or this one on his backcourt mate in Atlanta. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.